Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Renee. I like to read books and then talk about them on the internet. Hi, hello, welcome. You may see that we're ring lit today. Lit by a ring of light. Yeah, it's really dark, so this is necessary. But today I'm going to talk about everything I read in April. April was a full-on reading month. I started off hot and heavy out the gate, read like 6 books in one weekend, arguably way too many books for one weekend. It was 4 days. It was a long weekend. It was Easter. Pretty sure I read myself into a reading slump, which I'm currently kind of still in. I don't know. It's not fun. I would like to please be excused from this narrative. First up, I read Hicks by Jenni Fagan. This book is set in 16th century Scotland. It comes from a series of books that take a piece of Scottish history and use that as inspiration to tell the story or retell it. Jenni Fagan is a poet, and so she's taken her inspiration from a poem, and the poem's in the back and is titled A Grey Rose for Gayless Duncan. And Gayless Duncan is the protagonist at the heart of the story. She is a young girl who is going to be executed for being accused of being a witch. And while she is awaiting her execution, she's visited by this spirit from the future named Iris. Iris is also a distant relative of Gayless, so there is this familial connection between the two women at the heart of the story. And much of the story is Gayless recalling how she's come to be in this situation. It's at the hands of men. She has become collateral damage in this kind of political fight for power. And the book is really speaking to the ways in which women were treated throughout history, persecuted, ignored, killed, all that great stuff, for being slightly different, for having different views and ideas on really traditional ways of living. This character of Iris has come back to comfort Gayless in her last few hours, but to also kind of reiterate that message of persecution towards women throughout history, and just remind us all that it's still the same. Women are still being murdered and treated like second-class citizens in present day. I can see what it was trying to do, but I did not like the way that the character of Iris was presenting this message. It felt very performative. It felt very clunky compared to this very kind of lyrical, historical prose. Yeah, I just didn't feel as though the way that those old world and contemporary world views were brought together in this story. It felt mismatched in ways that took me out of it. I'm also not a huge fan of historical fiction, and I did not know that this was historical fiction going into it, so my bad, but also felt like it could have been done better. Next I read Citizen by Claudia Rankine. This was great. I loved this. Very lyrical, as can be suggested by the title, An American Lyric. Look at violence towards black people in America and how that is shown and has been witnessed in both Claudia Rankine's life on a personal level, and also in pop culture and sport, on the news. She's really using her base experience, her own personal experience, and almost saying like don't believe me that this is a thing that's happened? Here's an example from the culture that you might remember that is exactly the same thing. So it's really kind of contextualizing these, in some ways, small violences towards Black people in America, and also giving them a point of reference. Yeah, super powerful, super beautiful design in the way that it's laid out. Claudia Rankine's husband is a graphic designer, and I think is the person responsible for putting this book together from a design perspective. So you have pieces of artwork that are referenced in her writing. You have photographs from examples of like sporting incidences that she is referencing that have this ominous, almost art-like surrealist look to them. I look forward to reading it again, even though it's such a heavy topic and she's talking about these all too real and familiar things. I think reading it again and going into it again, you get something new out of it every time. And then following that, I read Always Italicise by Te Punga Somerville, sorry. Definitely not conscious decision reading these back to back, but they definitely work together back to back, which was fun. Where this is an experience that I am kind of familiar with, but not at the same time, because I'll never know what it is like to be a Black person in America. To follow it up with something that I am all too familiar with, that deals with ideas of racism and colonization and identity and belonging, was interesting, and this felt like the right book to read after that for me. Te Punga Somerville, she's a Māori poet and she is an English scholar. She is definitely living in this space of straddling these two worlds. Being an expert in the language of the colonizer is an interesting and complex thing to exist in. And I think the way that Alice presents that and acknowledges it and grapples with it, but always tries to uphold her Māori identity and to champion that in the English language, is a very interesting one. I loved this collection. I felt like it was empowering and uplifting, and it left me feeling really positive, which I was quite surprised by, because I was ready to feel jaded and angry, but this definitely doesn't do that. It's a very useful, helpful tool and piece of writing for anyone, for any Māori person that struggles with not having their reo, not speaking their language, but still feeling very much a part of their identity. How do you explore that in a language that is unfamiliar to that culture? Also, this won just this week the Ockham Prize for Poetry, so you should definitely get this and you should definitely read it. Okay, next I read Medea by Rachel Cusk. Actually, it's by Euripedes, but it's a retelling by Rachel Cusk. So it's contemporary, it's updated, and it's so good. I haven't read the original Euripedes Greek tragedy. The story of Medea is married to Jason. Jason leaves Medea for a younger woman. Medea becomes very obsessed with Jason's new wife, and in the end kills her, and then Medea also kills her own 2 children. I really need to read the original because I would like to know how much of Rachel Cusk's own adaptation has happened in this story, which I loved. But yeah, just out of curiosity for the original, it feels a little bit naughty reading this before the original, but whatever. Rachel Cusk has chosen to focus a lot on the role of a woman in a marriage, how much of the responsibility for that fallout is placed on her, the criticism that's placed on her, the guilt is placed on her, the way that she is left to think about the well-being of her children. Everything is kind of burdened upon her, and she is very much this character who is trying to push against all of those traditional views of women and mothers in these roles. She's a writer, she has been the provider, and now is having to struggle with not having the, I guess, the status of being a wife and being a divorced single mum. Yeah, I think it's explored those themes and ideas around motherhood and traditional female roles really well in such a short amount of pages. Some of my favorite parts were the arguments between Jason and Medea. The way that it's laid out on the pages is you've got these two people just like yelling over one another and interjecting and interrupting, and it's just this onslaught of words. You really feel the emotion and the rage and the need for both these people to say what they need to say, to voice their regrets, blame the other for the position they found themselves in. I mean, it's all too real in this retelling. It's what I love about Rachel Cusk's writing. She is not afraid to go to those ugly places. Also, just a quick note, I read this in April as well, and again, not on purpose, but these two together, so perfect. Rachel Cusk's memoir about her divorce, Aftermath. Can 100% see why she has chosen to adapt or retell this story in particular after reading this. The way that these two books are in conversation with each other is brilliant, and I love it. We'll talk about this a little bit later on, but absolutely loved. Want to read more Greek tragedy, drama, so if you have any recs, I'd love to hear. Next I read If an Egyptian Cannot Speak English by Noor Naga. I really don't want to talk too much about this book because I think the thing I loved about this book the most was that I didn't know a lot going into it, and I was very open to whatever it was going to deliver. I was absolutely blown away. I loved this book. It's an untraditional love story, which I love. It is following the meeting and the falling in love and the destruction of this relationship between these two very different people. One is an Egyptian American woman who comes from a very privileged background, and the other is a local Egyptian man who comes from a very poor, troubled background. A lot of the things that they're having to navigate are their own privileges and their own traumas, toxic behaviors, trying to meet in this way that should be familiar with the shared sense of identity. But again, their understandings and their views on identity are different because of their lived experiences and because of what they understand of the Egyptian way of living, the Arabic way of living, the culture, where they are situated, the political climate, what has gone on in the past. Like, there are all these things that feed into it, and they're trying to understand the other person but are kind of getting caught up with their own stuff. I think this book really turns into magic in the last part of it. The first part is meeting and the breaking down of the relationship, but the last part answers and reveals and blows apart everything you thought you knew about this book. I had a lot of criticisms about the characters up until the last part, and they were all kind of shattered by, I won't say twist, but it kind of is a twist. I recommend that you read this, find out for yourself what I'm talking about, and you will not be sorry. Kia ora. I am editing this vlog, listening to myself, watching myself, struggling to talk about Breast and Eggs by Mieko Kawakami. I'm realizing that the reason I found this book so hard to discuss is because I didn't like it all that much, and I kind of don't really go into that in the book. I spend most of my time trying to give a synopsis, which is what I hate doing, but often what I rely on when I don't know how else to talk about a book. So I just wanted to say that in here. I'm cutting out my review because it's just boring and not exciting, and if you want to know what happens in the book or what the blurb is, just read the back. Yeah, I wanted to love this book. It is endorsed by Elena Ferrante, who is one of my favorite writers. I understand where the love for it comes from. I think my issue that I had with it is that these themes around the female body and the questions that the different characters at the beginning, Natsuko, Mireriko, Makiko, have, get a bit played out throughout the book, and I would have really liked a bit more conciseness when it came to the characters meditating on these things. It was a really slow book for me. Yeah, sadly it didn't quite work for me. I found it was about 100 pages too long, and I would have appreciated a bit of an edit. Also hated the ending, but really interested in the questions around motherhood that it brought up. These traditional ideas that were being, I guess, pushed against, particularly in Japanese culture, were interesting to me. I just think that the length of the book and the way that it kind of set it all up very early on, and then really kind of picked over continually throughout the rest of the book, it just became a bit boring to me. So yeah, those are my thoughts. That's all I'm gonna say, and keep watching the video. Next I read Too Loud a Solitude by Bohumil Hrabal. This was a fun little book. I really enjoyed this. The protagonist of the story is named Jhumpa. He is this odd, strange, lonely man who for 35 years has been compacting paper down in that dungeon. So part of his job is kind of like rescuing books and literature, and through that he is discovering things, learning things, gaining opinions, and through this act of ingesting these books and taking in the information before destroying them, he feels as though he is preserving the knowledge in that way. Yeah, that central message is kind of really sweet and plays into one of the joys and acts of and beauties of reading. It's speaking to a lot of like the censorship and political ideals, and it's very philosophical. These are parts that I don't claim to have fully understood, but I think the parts that I enjoyed the most out of this were the use of language and the playfulness in the writing. Some really dark, dank, gruesome descriptions of certain things from Hunter's perspective were just weird and gross but wonderful, and kind of built these really vivid images in your head. I watched a really interesting book club discussion with, I can't remember the the name of the university or the name of the college, but one of the guests in the book club was Hans Ulrich, who is someone that I am interested in. I want to read more of his kind of philosophy and thinking. He spoke a lot to the language and the use of the repetition and the playfulness of it that I found really interesting. So yeah, a fun little book that I was not expecting to enjoy as much as I did. Next, I read Beach Read by Emily Henry. I am not going to talk about this book because I don't think that would be fair. If you follow me on Instagram, or if you've seen the little video that I posted on Tube Shorts, you'll know that I did not love this book. I'm not going to criticize it for that because I am not a fan of romance novels. Why would I pick this book up, you may ask? Well, I was trying to be open-minded. I was trying to try something new. I really did go into reading this book with an open mind. I wasn't reading it so that I could take it down or criticize it heavily. I honestly, genuinely went into it thinking I might really enjoy this, and this could be something that is fun and playful and just like a bit easy and just lighthearted. I just now 100% know that that is not the type of romance story that I'm after. I've given it a try and it wasn't for me, and I don't feel like it's fair to come on here, not rip it to shreds, but criticize it for being exactly what it claims to be. I won't be venturing near any more Emily Henry. Okay, next I read Dinosaurs by Lydia Millett. Actually listened to this on audio. I enjoyed this. It wasn't like a hugely impactful book for me, but I enjoyed it. We are following a male protagonist that I cannot even remember his name right now. I think it was like Cal or Dan or something. Anyway, he moves to this suburb in Arizona. He's moved from New York. He is living next to this family who he becomes quite close with, and from there we learn more about his background, how he's come to be in the position he is. He's this very wealthy man who likes to spend his time volunteering because he doesn't need to work. And we learn about his past relationships, a lot of his friendships. It's really about his kind of interaction with this family and the way that he is choosing to fit in to this kind of new surrounding. I quite enjoyed it for the banal suburban American family life. I really enjoy novels like that. It reminded me a little bit of Anne Patchett in a way, which I quite enjoy, specifically her books like Commonwealth and The Dutch House. There's something about that to me feels a little bit like watching reality TV. The stakes are quite low. There's no real plot or thread. It's kind of just like you're getting bits of their life here and there and learning about them. And it's quite easy to just read or listen. I think the issues that I had with this book is that I felt like the themes of the book were trying to depict this male character as this very woke, open, ideal, feminist, not like other men type character. And I just wondered if the tone of that was a little bit off. When I started to kind of sense that that was what it was doing, I was just like, oh, I don't know about this. And I just left feeling like, okay, so I'm supposed to believe that this man is like great because he does the bare minimum? That's the way I felt. I don't know, if you like Anne Patchett and you like her kind of writing, I would say that this is similar, but if you're also not a fan of men, maybe don't read this. Next I read Aftermath by Rachel Cusk, like I mentioned earlier. This is her memoir about her divorce, and I read this as a buddy read with Nathan from Nathan's Nook, and let me tell you, if you ever have the chance to read a buddy read or read something with Nathan, do it. He will change your world. He definitely opens you up to think about things that you would never think about, because he is very smart and thoughtful, and I've said all these things before on my channel, but he really is, and I got so much more out of this book when he asked questions and kind of made me think and look a bit deeper, and yeah, I absolutely loved it. I think it's up there with one of my favorites of her books so far, and I'm quickly enjoying her non-fiction writing just as much, if not more, than her fiction. They're cool, I know. I think the thing that I took away from this book, and this is gonna sound really stupid and basic and like, duh, everyone knows this, or like that's obvious, but the idea that Rachel Cusk uses her writing to explore everything in life. It's the lens through which she views, dissects, understands, navigates the world, and it feeds into both her real life and her fictional writing. And this book kind of feels like fiction. How can someone excavate their life to this degree and not feel like so exposed to everything? I'm obviously still having a lot of thoughts about this book as I process the reading of it, but loved the short story type ending. It was very reminiscent of Lucy by Jamaica Kincaid, that last chapter with the babysitter and the nanny, and her being witness to like this marriage coming apart. Really brilliant, and I would happily read this again. Okay, the last book that I read in April was The Clothing of Books by Jhumpa Lahiri. This is an essay collection about book cover design in the publishing world, and Jhumpa Lahiri's own personal experience with that, her kind of disdain for many of her book covers and how she feels misrepresented through her book covers, and she hasn't ever been involved in that process. So kind of talking about the vulnerability and the personal relinquishing that has to be done from an author's point of view to this unknown who is tasked with the job of giving her book a face, basically. I thought it was fine. Like, this essay is fine. A lot of it felt like she feels like she's been slighted and wants to tell the world, which is, you know, fair enough. She has some of the most hideous book covers I have ever seen, and they don't really often reflect her writing or what the stories that she's telling, and yeah, I would be upset too. I don't know whether she offers too much more thinking beyond that. Yeah, she tries to go a bit deep with it, and at that point I kind of am just like, it's a book cover, like I don't think you need to philosophize it all that much, but maybe you feel the need to, so okay. This is just like a fun essay collection to read, I think, or essay to read, and not think about too much, like Jhumpa is. Okay, that is everything that I read in April. A friend, a little last minute friend. So that's everything I read in April. Thank you for making it this far. I know it's a lot of books to get through. Appreciate your time and attention. Let me know what you read in April. I would love to hear. any recs for Greek myth or Greek tragedy. If you have any thoughts about these books as well. Dying to know. Okay, I will see you very soon. Bye bye.